Tailwind or Trick Room could come out in this particular game. But let's jump into the top four. Landorus and Calyrex out on the field for Michelle, and it's going to be that Sneasler. Love to see it with the Miraidon on Nikolaj's side.
Yeah, it's a nice approach here from Michelle. I've got two Pokemon out on the field that you can protect this first turn to kind of, one, scout out what the Miraidon and Nikolaj's side is going to lock into because it has that Choice Specs item, and you're also getting around the potential threat of that Fake Out slowing you down for at least one turn from the Sneasler. Whether we see the Protect or whether we see Michelle kind of reposition here, you might have something like Incineroar on the back that you could bring in for that Landorus, because it's doubtful you would ever see the Miraidon go for an electric type attack into that ground type there. So it might open the door for you to have that Fake Out support the next turn, but it is risky at the same time. You could take unnecessary damage where the Protect is a bit of a safer play here. It's just whether or not Michelle locks in with that. Nikolaj expects that and then tries to capitalize on it.
Again, it's not just the moves you pick. You have to try and predict what your opponent is going to do and adjust accordingly. Nikolaj taking every second of this fun turn to make sure that he gets it right. And we're going to see a Terrestrialization straight out of the blocks now into something like the Miraidon here that's going to be able to be that Terra Fairy, and it's going to be able to boost up the Dazzling Gleam, getting some really decent spread damage onto the opposing side of the field.
Yeah, and now you are in a position where you are going to be weak to the Sludge Bomb from the Landorus, so you still have to respect that, but we're just going to see a Protect here. We did talk about the threat of the Fake Out, kind of slowing that down and being a bit of a target for whatever that Miraidon decides to throw out, but it gives Michelle the chance to just see what it locks into before making the next move.
And the Fake Out actually forcing defensive plays from both the opposing Pokemon. It's a very safe play on Michelle's side because you know you burn that Fake Out, and in a way you also get to force Nikolaj to commit to that Terrestrialization to no avail. So he's locked in with that. You know there's a Dazzling Gleam. It's a great way to get information from this double Protect.
And what's beautiful about this is now you know the Dazzling Gleam is locked in on that Miraidon. If you look at the Terra type on that Landorus, it is poison, so can go for that Terrestrialization. It's then going to have the resistance to those fighting type attacks from the Sneasler. Not that that would be super effective anyway, but it just gives you that little bit of an extra reason to go for it and then get that boost on top of the Sludge Bomb, which is super effective against the Miraidon. The Calyrex does have to be a little bit careful here, of course. It doesn't want to take a double up from that Miraidon. Boosted Dazzling Gleam, of course, and then a follow-up from the Sneasler. It would be the other way around, of course. It is going to be vulnerable right now to that Throat Chop because of that Psychic typing on it. So you do have to be a little bit careful what you're doing with that Calyrex.
And again, every last second counting here on Nikolaj's side, deciding to get the Miraidon out of there just in case, as you said, Lee, something like the Sludge Bomb could come through and then do devastating damage to that newly fairy formed of the Miraidon. Zamazenta is going to join the fray, though. This is a great Pokemon with that Steel typing to be able to get around any poison shenanigans that Landorus wants to throw its way, and it is going to lock in that poison Terrestrialization, so this could be where Michelle is trying to go on the offensive, but with Zamazenta in the way, it could be difficult.
Has he called the switch, though, and went for the Earth Power? Because if he has, that's going to be huge. Gunk Shot coming out from the Sneasler into the Calyrex, doing nice damage and picking up the poison on top of that. Not what Michelle wants to see.
Yes, Tark needs that one restricted.
Here it is!
Power comes through. That's a knockout. Oh my goodness, fantastic adaptation by Nikolaj, but Michelle was one step ahead.
The pressure was too much. Michelle calling it perfectly, saying, yes, I know the Dazzling Gleam you're locked into, the Terra Poison there, and taking full advantage of the turn, removing that big threat in Zamazenta with one fell swoop.
No hesitation on Michelle's side. He means business as he's trying to get into that grand final. Sneasler, I think, was a nice play, however, getting that poison on the Calyrex, putting a little bit of a timer on it, and Nikolaj still has Pokemon in the back that are going to be helpful here. The Miraidon, however, is in such a detrimental spot where it doesn't want to take one of those Sludge Bombs.
Yeah, it doesn't want to take a Sludge Bomb, but it can come back in now and it can lock into something more favorable. Now you can use those electric type attacks, especially because the electric train's active on the field. Hit on Engine will be powering that up, and now the Electro Drift probably in that position where it will be close, very close to picking up the knockout, but it's easy saying that in most situations. But Michelle, one of those trainers, does like to really put refinement into training their Pokemon, so whether or not it's going to be enough to take it down, that's the other question. But you would say the Miraidon in a good position now where it can come back in and like reset, have another go at this position.
And you've got the Farigiraf as well in the back. Something like a Psychic into that new poison type could be something that Michelle has to be aware of, as the Miraidon here is now on the field. Of course, it probably doesn't want to necessarily go for that Dazzling Gleam with the poison type Landorus on the field. As you said, Lee, maybe wanting to utilize that electric terrain, boost up its electric type moves even further and deal some devastating damage on the field to try and get rid of this Landorus before it can do even more damage.
Yeah, and the problem is that Michelle's got the option to just protect again with the Landorus. There's no reason not to just scout out what this Miraidon's going to lock into. Then, with 2 fresh Pokemon in the back, if you've got an optimal switch, then you say, well, okay, I'm just going to switch out to this one now because you've locked into this move. The Sneasler getting lower and lower in health. How many turns longer is it going to be left on the field? And the more you concentrate down on the Landorus, it gives the opening to the Calyrex Ice Rider. Michelle managing this board position and locking down what Nikolaj has to do.
I think that's a smart observation about the information game that Michelle is able to play here, thanks to the utility of Protect on both those Pokemon, but it's not going to happen now. Electrodrift does come through. No Protect on Michelle's side of the field. That's a one-hit KO down onto that Landorus with a critical hit as well to get a little bit of redemption for the fallen partner of the Zamazenta as Landorus does go down.
Yeah, big critical hit there. Whether or not that mattered, we don't know, but it does, like we say, leave this Calyrex open to go for the Glacial Lance. It will be able to get it off onto both these targets, do some nice damage into that Miraidon, taking about 50% health, and just topping up with that leftovers. It does have to contest with that poison, though, that will be kind of undoing that recovery.
It's nice to get the damage on the board, but no KOs means no chilling Nay boost to gain even more momentum from these Glacial Lancers. I like the switch from Farigiraf coming in because you now allow another Fake Out to come through from that Sneasler when it rejoins the field.
The nice thing about this, though, is you say, okay, well, you take down my Landorus with that Electrodrift. Now you're locked into Electrodrift, right? Well, I've got my Miraidon in the back, and I don't need to worry about that Dazzling Gleam, so I can bring that onto the field now, feeling pretty good to go after the remaining Pokemon on Nikolaj's side of the field, kind of almost forcing another switch, and then you can concentrate down on that Farigiraf because you don't really need to worry so much about that Miraidon. The Calyrex in a vulnerable position, yes, you can get knocked out from an Electrodrift there, but you've got the easy option just to say, I'm going to protect and then use my own Miraidon to clean this up.
And the Miraidon on Nikolaj's side has taken a significant amount of damage, so an Electrodrift from the opposing Miraidon is going to be able to clean through that Pokemon. Farigiraf as well is just unfortunately not a threat right now. Psychic and Foul Play are not going to be doing anything really to the opposing Miraidon, so it's in a prime position to, as you said, just start dealing with the other Pokemon, picking them up one by one.
Yeah, and that's the beauty about this positioning. And Michelle could even go one step further and go for the Volt Switch onto that Miraidon, saying, I know you're probably going to switch into the Sneasler, but I'm going to get my Miraidon out of here as well, whilst also picking up potential KOs on either target that comes onto the field as we see that Sneasler come out once again.
Maybe the Miraidon saying, hey, I kind of need my Dazzling Gleam later, Sneasler. You've got to go front and center right now and take this Electrodrift for me. Electrodrift will come through, connect into the Sneasler, and that's an easy knockout.
Yeah, another big critical hit. Not that that one mattered one little bit. And now, yeah, you could go for the Volt Switch, you could go for the Electrodrift. It doesn't really matter because once that Miraidon comes back onto the field, especially when it's partnered with a Trick Room, is huge because this now means that Michelle, if he does have the slow Miraidon in the Twisted Dimensions, will 100% be outspeeding Nikolaj. Now comes back onto the field. Nikolaj trying to reposition, come back in a favorable position to say, okay, I can't use my electric type attacks to any effect, but I can use Dazzling Gleam, but I need to switch out to be able to use it. Now I'm switching out, coming back onto the field, but the problem is that Trick Room beautifully timed by Michelle. Now the Electrodrift, a big threat, and the Miraidon from Nikolaj cannot protect. The Farigiraf just protected, so as well, you're a bit pinned, you're a bit locked. Michelle setting this endgame up perfectly. This
is what we were saying to watch out for at the beginning of the match, is the way speed control is going to be manipulated in this game, and that Trick Room late coming in isn't there for a Trick Room sweeper, but it's there just to stop the offensive speedy Pokemon on Nikolaj's side from gaining the momentum, because Nikolaj's got Miraidon in. He's able to lock into the Dazzling Gleam. This would be a perfect situation to deal with the opposing Miraidon that cannot Terrestrialize, is going to be forced to keep its Dragon typing, but the fact that the Calyrex now in Trick Room is able to go first, is able to get the knockout on Miraidon, means Miraidon is not even able to move, and Farigiraf is going to be easily cleaned up by the opposing Miraidon on Michelle's side.
Yeah, here's me talking about the Miraidon having an easy time under Trick Room, but yes, of course, we have to remember as well, there is a Calyrex Ice Rider here, and under Trick Room, that is also going to go first. It's going to benefit, and we already saw the damage from one Glacial Lance. This one is enough to clean up the big restricted in that Miraidon, and now Michelle's Miraidon able to clean up the game, take this first one.
It was nice for Farigiraf to try and get a KO there at the end against the Calyrex, but it was to no avail. The Miraidon just too strong, and even a fourth unrevealed Pokemon on Michelle's side hiding in the back. So Miraidon taking this, Michelle takes game one game closer to the finals.
Wow, what a first game for us. That was incredible. And the fact that Michelle had one Pokemon that wasn't revealed, it's pretty huge in that match, because I think that is really key information to keep hidden, because it makes it more difficult for Nikolaj to prepare going into this game too. If you want to make adjustments, if you knew all 4, you would think, okay, well, I've got a really good picture of what I need to kind of combat against. But because there's that one Pokemon hidden, you've still got 3 options it could be. And if you get that decision wrong going into this game, things could get bad pretty quickly. But the predictions there that Michelle was able to make each and every turn, the Earth Power is so pivotal. Catching that Zamazenta, just being able to deal with that Pokemon so easily made it so difficult for any sort of momentum swing from Nikolaj's side of the field. And Michelle just absolutely rolling through it.
I mean, that was a great moment, right? When you saw the Earth Power coming through, like such great momentum on Michelle's side there. But I liked what Nikolaj was trying to do in that turn as well, you know, playing the advantage, identifying the Terra type on the opposing side and preserving your Miraidon quite rightly, because if there wasn't that Trick Room at the end, Miraidon on Nikolaj's side would have been a key component to trying to get that victory. But the fact that Michelle was just able to kind of play around that, going, hey, I know you're going to keep your Miraidon nice and safe in the back, so let me take down what comes in, I think was a beautiful play.
Yeah, and I think if you are Nikolaj, I think maybe leading off with the Miraidon again in this next game might not be the best plan, because it's so easy for Michelle to lead with those protecting Pokemon and just scout out what you're going to do, kind of burn through the fake-out disruption that you've got as well if that Sneasler does appear next to it. And I think it almost gives Michelle the advantage in that situation where it's like, okay, I know what you're locked into. I've got like lots of flexibility with my Terra-type switches in the back to make this a really awkward position that then I'm going to be able to capitalize off. And I don't think you can give Michelle the room to be able to do that. So maybe adjusting the lead slightly. The Sneasler was actually really good in being disruptive and making Michelle have to operate differently to what they probably want to. But whether we'll see a switch up or not, doesn't look like it.
We said the Sneasler was effective, and that's why it's back for round 2, paired up with the Miraidon as the Landorus and the Calyrex Ice Rider come out for Michelle. So electric terrain on the field means the electric seed on Sneasler will also be activated, giving it this defense boost in the face of the Calyrex.
What do you do differently here if you are Nikolaj? Because you're in that same situation where Michelle has nothing really to think about other than going for that double protect, and I don't think you really need to risk anything else. The only thing that Nikolaj could do is maybe predict the double protect and get something off the field that's going to be a little bit more beneficial. Whether or not you've brought something like the Saluna in the back, I don't know. It's tricky because you kind of want to have that Farigiraf, I guess, for later in the game where there might be those situations where Fake Out could come out from Michelle's side and be a bit of a problem. So if you've got the Saluna, could be a good time to maybe bring it out onto the field and expect this double protect coming out.
Well, there's the first protect, a shake of the head on Nikolaj's side as the Calyrex also goes for the second one here. So just burning through that fake out. But Nikolaj hasn't gone for a Terrestrialization here, so still has that preserved, but will be revealing what this Miraidon has been locked into. The fake out going down into the Calyrex, maybe trying to stop it going for a Trick Room here. And we're going to see the Draco Meteor as the choice, and that was going down into the Landorus potentially.
Now, this is the better choice. I think the Draco Meteor threatens a lot more and a really good decision from Nikolaj, because now you don't have the optimal Terrestrialization from Michelle to kind of block that attack, and you don't really have optimal switches unless Michelle's got the Grimmsnarl in the back.
True.
But you've then got to guess the right slot. Where is the Draco Meteor go? And you would expect the Draco Meteor to probably go into that Landorus because it is threatening the Sneasler right now, and it is threatening the Miraidon. So if Michelle does decide to switch, and it is the Grimmsnarl, if that has been brought, that could be a little bit of a detriment, but a much better choice here from Nikolaj going into this second turn.
I would be surprised to see a Grimmsnarl hiding in the back for this one. I think if it's coming in the game, it would be out front and center, but then who knows? Michelle's always playing his own game as the Terrestrialization comes through. Gunk Shot will come through into the Calyrex. Will it get the poison again this time? Yes, it does. So Sneasler always hitting its marks with these Gunk Shot, making sure it's doing as much damage as possible as Miraidon does connect the Draco Meteor into that Landorus. This is going to be a one-hit KO and just removes it from the field.
Yeah, it's another situation. It's a nice knockout. You remove one of those big threats. It was very disruptive from that game one. But the same thing can be said here. You leave that Calyrex kind of open to go for the Glacial Lance, get some really respectable damage onto the opposite side of the field. And now that Miraidon's in that situation where it's locked into Draco Meteor, you can bring your own Miraidon in. You can Terrestrialize. It's pretty risky, though, in front of a Sneasler, so maybe another option, but at least you know what to expect from the Miraidon now, because it is going to be weaker. It is locked into the Draco Meteor, and it probably has to switch out this next turn, which might open the door for you to start taking advantage of that position that is a little bit awkward. Do you lock in with the Terrestrialization if you're Michelle? That's the big question, because if you don't, then you could maybe just save that for a little bit later on in this game, get another Glacial Lance off, pick up that Sneasler this time, and get some good damage onto whatever comes in if you expect Nikolaj to switch that Miraidon out, which I feel like he has to in this situation.
I feel the Glacial Lance is incredibly scary at this point as well, because that's going to be able to get a double KO on Miraidon and Sneasler here. So you might think, okay, Miraidon's faster, it can go for another Draco Meteor, but it's going to take that special attack drop, and you really cannot leave the opposing Miraidon unchecked in this match. Sneasler's able to go for that gunk shot, though, fastest thing on the field into Miraidon. There's no terrestrialization, so it does about over 50%. Also gets the poison through, so Sneasler really doing his best to try and get its trainer and even Stevens here as Miraidon follows up with the Draco Meteor, and the double up is more than enough to be able to get the knockout here.
The conviction to keep the Miraidon on the field great and go for that double up because you're covering bases. The gunk shot gets the fairy terrestrialization, the Draco Meteor gets if it doesn't, but then you've got to deal with this Glacial Lance coming out, and it will pick up 2 big knockouts here. Now it's going to get that Chilling Near boost twice. It's going to be +2 attack, and now Nikolaj down to that last 2 Pokemon. You know one of them is safe in knowing that it'll probably be that Zamazenta, but what is the other Pokemon coming out with it?
Well, this is where you've really made a trade, right? Because you have got rid of a formidable threat on the opposing side. You're now 2 Pokemon apiece on either side, so both trainers going to have to be bringing in their last remaining Pokemon, but you have given this Calyrex a +2 boost. It has the poison, it has a decent amount of damage, so you might be able to get a KO before it's able to move, but you're going to be banking on the Zamazenta to pull through on that, because Farigiraf, I mean, actually, wait, Farigiraf has Foul Play. This is at +2. Farigiraf could get the job done here if it's able to deal with the Calyrex before it deals with you type thing.
It definitely could, and I think that's the big threat. You do have the water terrestrialization for Michiel here to get away from that dark weakness that you've got from the Foul Play, but again, it's still going to hit pretty hard. And also the fact is you don't have the Trick Room set up now, so the Zamazenta in a position where it is going to be the fastest thing on the field. It's got a kind of a free target into either the Calyrex or the Urshifu with that body press. It's going to do significant damage. The one thing that you do have to watch out for is this Urshifu. It is a bit of a problem because it has got that choice band item, so whatever it does decide to lock in, it will be hitting pretty hard. And if it is into the Zamazenta as well with the Surging Strikes, it will ignore that defense boost that it's got. The problem is the Calyrex is poisoned, so it is on a bit of a timer. Even though it's in a difficult position, has it got enough room to maybe weave in a Trick Room? If you have, that's great, but can you utilize those Leech Seeds either? That's the other question. It feels too weakened at this condition.
Yeah, and this is a Ghost Terrestrialization, which will now leave it actually vulnerable to a potential Foul Play, whereas previously that would have been resisted. So depending on where the Farigiraf is able to find its mark, let's see. Nikolaj nodding his head. They're going to see the Protect on the Calyrex, so it's not going to be taking any damage in this particular turn, as the Behemoth Bash was going down into that slot, maybe trying to get the knockout. But it's going to come down to what this close combat is going to do. It's Choice Banded. It doesn't get the knockout. Farigiraf in a position to be able to retaliate. The defense doesn't even drop further on this Urshifu. So Farigiraf able to go for something like the Foul Play into the slot is going to do a huge amount of damage, but can it get the knockout?
That's
yes, it
a call! That's a huge call here from Nikolaj. Expecting the terrestrialization there was the most optimal thing that Michiel could do, and the tables are flipped around here in a hard lock from Nikolaj. Going to be able to tie this game up and take us to a game 3.
I mean, this Calyrex on the field has been so formidable for Michiel the whole way through this set, but now it's got a little bit of a wall to get through. It is at +2. We still cannot underestimate that, but with the low HP it's got, and if Zamazenta obviously gets the edge on it with something like that Behemoth Bash, then it's going to be able to clean up the game.
Yeah, and I think we saw the speed interactions earlier on where the Farigiraf definitely outsped the Calyrex. Outside of Trick Room, of course, without that Trick Room support, the Calyrex not in the best position at all. And the Behemoth Bath going to be super effective into this. And we do see the cancellation from Michiel, and Nikolaj coming back and saying, I'm not done. I am wanting to get to the final. I'm going to give it everything I've got, and we saw exactly that. What a great adjustment going into that game 2, and now we will be going to a game 3. Exactly what we want to see heading towards the finals.
I was kind of worried when seeing Farigiraf come onto the field, not known as being one of the offensive powerhouses, but the fact that Foul Play is able to do more damage when the opponents are more boosted in their physical attack. You've got a Pokemon at +2, then you've got a Choice Band Urshifu that kindly gives you the Ghost Terror type as well to really give an opening for Farigiraf to claim victory. And now we are even Stevens going to the one game, the deciding game of who our second finalists will be here at these special championships.
Yeah, that's it. And, you know, I think the one thing that you would say is in both games 1 and hand too. Both players have been able to catch the other out with really big predicts. You know, Michelle in game 1 with the Earth Power onto the Zamazenta switch, and then in that game there, Nikolaj calling the terrestrialization onto the Urshifu, surviving that close combat and being able to retaliate with a big knockout and really tie that game up. So everything to do. Michelle in that last game didn't really get much utility out of the Landorus. You're taking the trade, yes, but I think Nikolaj playing into that game a lot better here, saying, well, yeah, we can play the trade game. I'll be locked into Draco Meteor, but I'm going to play it a lot better this time. And I'm not going to fall for these traps almost. Staying in, having that conviction with the Draco Meteor to get that Miraidon. Calling that it wouldn't terrestrialize as well in that point, because that's kind of dangerous. I mean, the gunk shot probably would have been enough anyway. You had the options there with that Sneasler, and it really came into effect there to make it difficult for Michelle.
Well, game 3, deciding game in this final top 4. Calyrex, Landorus, out front and center, and Sneasler Miraidon. I think I've seen this show before, Lee.
Yeah, we have, and we'll be going one more time. So we'll see what our players are going to do this time around. Can again expect maybe a double protect coming out, or whether or not Michelle takes the risk here. I don't feel like the sort of player that would take risks in this sort of situation where you maybe don't protect one of these targets expecting the double up into something else, and then you can maybe get a slight advantage that way. But it is very risky, because if you get that wrong, you could lose a piece of your puzzle very quickly and things can start to snowball from there. So Nikolaj in that driving seat once again with that active fake out, got the Miraidon in a position where it can start threatening knockouts very early on.
Well, here we go. The fake out pressuring on the field could easily force this double protect. Landorus goes for it and Calyrex goes for it. No need to change up the strategy at this point. But Nikolaj, once again, has locked in an attack but not used that terrestrialization, preserving it and utilizing it later on in the game. If it's going to be the same play as game 2, it's the Draco Meteor down into that opposing Landorus. So really just kind of going through the same script that won game 2 for him.
Yeah, and I wonder if Michelle's made any adjustments with Pokemon that they've got in the back. We talked about that Grimmsnarl. Doesn't feel like the most optimal Pokemon to bring into this game, especially when you're looking at the Urshifu as something that can come in late game and start sweeping up. But if you do have that Grimmsnarl here, although it's going to come in on probably a gunk shot, it's not ideal, but it does allow you to preserve that Landorus a little bit better. Take the special attack drops from that Miraidon and then reevaluate, reposition a little bit later. Maybe enough room where the Calyrex can set that Trick Room up, because it is so valuable once that Trick Room is in effect, because then those Glacial Lances can start to stack up and you can get that damage quite quickly onto the field without worrying about getting knocked out first.
And we see Nikolaj do this time and time again, taking every second to really calculate the moves, make sure there's no sudden decisions that could lead to error. But you can see he's concentrating, hoping in this moment. Miraidon is indeed going to go for the terrestrialization here that Terra Fairy has now been locked in and committed to. So the Draco Meteor, if it's able to find its mark, we know that it can get the knockout onto the opposing Landorus, but is it going to be able to do it this time? Sneasler goes for the throat chop, a lot of damage into that opposing Calyrex, leaving it vulnerable with that critical hit, but no gunk shot this time with that residual poison. Miraidon, however, doubles up, finds its mark. That's a double into the Calyrex and a guaranteed knockout.
Yeah, big knockout onto that restricted Pokemon on Michelle's side, but it does leave the Landorus free to fire off an attack into either one of these, and this time it's into the Sneasler, and this time it will be enough, removing that poison threat.
Sneasler goes down, but the Miraidon is able to dodge out of the way of a potential Sludge Bomb, if that was something Michelle had maybe read into. And yes, your Sneasler has gone down, but it's helped get rid of a restricted, and you now have the opportunity to bring a free Pokemon in from the back. Yeah,
and it's a much better position now without that Sneasler. You can more freely terrestrialize your own Miraidon if you're Michelle. The problem is that Nikolaj has a kind of cover as well in that Zamazenta with that Behemoth's Bash that would be super effective into the Miraidon as well. So it doesn't make it as simple. You can get around the threat of the Draco Meteor a little bit easier, but again, by doing so, you put yourself in a vulnerable position against the Zamazenta. So your main priority is looking at that Zamazenta, dealing with that right now. And I think with an Electro Drift, you could be close to doing it, of course. You're gonna, in the process, have to protect that Landorus, but then by doing it, you open up the door for Nikolaj to reposition their own Miraidon, get it off the field without really any risk, get the Farigiraf in, and then kind of be able to bring it in later to choose once again one of those 4 moves, whichever one's going to be more impactful in that situation.
But also the Landorus cannot be underestimated. It could go for Earth Power or Sludge Bomb respectively into either of Nikolaj's Pokemon to get some super effective damage on the board. So either you double up into it or you have to make an adjustment around it. And you can see that Nikolaj switched out the Miraidon, brought the Farigiraf into the field, and Landorus stays in play. Miraidon going for the Electro Drift, going into what was the opposing Miraidon, and Farigiraf unable to hold on. That's a one-hit KO. Farigiraf leaves the field as quickly as it was able to join, but it does leave a little bit of Rocky Helmet damage that's always always nice, but this Landorus, it's gone for the Earth Power locked in against this opposing Zamazenta. It could be devastating damage. The Miraidon easily able to take that Behemoth Bath, but let's look at Landorus. Earth Power connects.
This is a huge turn and a huge knockout as well. The conviction not to terastallize with the Miraidon paying off for Michiel, and now it is 1 versus 3 Pokemon. Nikolaj got it all to do.
Who needs double ups when you can get one-hit KOs? That's what Michelle Kelsch is saying, being able to get the double there on both of Nikolaj's Pokemon, forcing this Miraidon in. All it can really do is go for Dazzling Gleam and cross its little paws and hope that it's going to be able to get some critical hits, but Terrestrialization is still on Michelle's side. You can drop that Dragon typing, you can turn into the Poison typing. All the options are there. The cards are in Michelle's favor.
Perfectly timed, perfectly chosen. Terrestrialization to resist this Dazzling Gleam that's inevitably going to come out into the Miraidon. Probably enough to pick up the knockout, but Landorus doesn't care. It's going for that Terra Poison type. It's going to return with a Sludge Bomb and lock this up, sending Michiel into the final here at the Utrecht Special Championship.
This is all it takes. One Sludge Bomb and Miraidon goes down. Michelle Kelsch does it. He's in the finals with a smile to boot. Congratulations.
Explosive scenes.
What an incredible match. You can see what it means to him as well. And commiserations to Nikolaj, because I love the team. I love the way Nikolaj played so composed.